Renee. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of Saturdays with Renee, featuring Renee Johnston. I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be here with you. How you doing, Renee?
I am, as you always say, as good as possible given the current situations. I'm still here.
It's always good to be honest, without having to expand.
Right.
This could be expected. Let's keep it moving. I don't want to lie like it's all good,
Right. But you know what? But also, I try to remind myself, like, I'm still here, right? Like, no matter what chaos is ensuing, no matter what is happening, like, I woke up, everything else is extra. Once that happens, I'm still here.
So just so we aren't confusing folks too much, while we are set up to invite, of course, the remixers to participate in this premiere, we are not live.
It's Jared's fault again, yeah.
It is. It is. And it's
look, you gotta go, man. You gotta go support. You gotta go do daddy ball. You gotta do it. There's no you can't mess around with that stuff, man.
Purpose. Yeah, no, it's
you can't mess around with that stuff.
Strictly for the babies. So, but that said, we do have a great show. You have well, folks will remember our guest, but
oh, definitely,
you've lined up, yet another return of a great guest, of yet another great guest. So I'll let you do the introduction, and then we can start swinging, as Malcolm X said.
Yeah, let's go. So Mahi has been with us before, and previously when she joined, she spoke with us about the Sudan and some of the work that she is doing as she pursues her advanced studies. But because Mahi is Mahi, she was on the ground and part of the Syracuse University encampment that just shut down last week, and I spent like a week, just so y'all know, harassing her over WhatsApp. Like, are you okay? Are you okay? But she was sleeping in a tent. So she really had no time to be messing with me and my henning, my worrying about my kiddos. So once they shut down, by choice, I will say they were not forced to close up the encampment. They chose to do so. Mahi agreed to join us to talk about all of the things that were going on at Syracuse University with regard to the encampment. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff as it surrounds these encampments. But thank you, Mahi, for your time.
Right, welcome back. Yay.
Thank you both for inviting me back. I'm honored, and it's my pleasure to be here.
So were you able to see, do you see the folder, Jared, because I tried to be neat. Did you see the folder that I put on the run sheet? Because I tried.
No, I just went to the straight run sheet. So there's a separate folder.
Well, the link is in the run sheet, because I didn't want you to have to search. So there's actually on the run sheet, it says encampment files in column D. See, look at that. Look how organized I be, man.
Oh, wow. But I did not look into these. Okay, so I thought I had done the homework. I didn't even see this. So,
I know. So before Mahi says anything, can we just show there's a video that is called Palestine Will Be Free? And it is just a quick few seconds of the encampment and them chanting. And so I thought we could get started with that and give everybody the feels from what they did on campus. So super quick, but I'm, as most people may or may not know I am a graduate of Syracuse University. Both my undergrad and graduate studies were at Syracuse. And so it warms my heart to see this happening on the quad instead of Frisbee playing. So, Mahi, do you want to start us off by just explaining like what brought the decision on? Like, why did you all decide to do this? And like what was part of the process of setting this all up and getting it going on campus?
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely start us off with that. And maybe I can start us off with like what has been happening on campus since October 7th. Because there has been attempts by students to organize different things, and the administration, the university has really responded in repressive ways. And so part of this encampment and the demands that you see related to our encampment was really related to like what we are basically unable to do since October 7th. So one of the first events we had on campus since October 7th was inviting Professor Rabab Abdul Hadi, who's a Palestinian professor in San Francisco, to come speak. And this event was organized by 3 different groups on campus: the Black Graduate Student Association, the African Graduate Students Network, and the Africa Initiative, which is an initiative under the African American Studies Department. And so we collectively decided like we want to bring a professor from like that could teach us like a teach-in, basically 101 Palestine about what's happening. And so we organized that event, and literally the day of the event, the administration canceled our event. They sent out a blast email canceling it and basically claiming that there was some security hazard. So these organizations on campus routinely organize events. There's been no such like interaction from admin regarding what these groups are doing, whether or not their security is safe, whether or not like their space. And so the excuse they gave us was essentially like, oh, we can't, there's some fire hazards in the building that we can't account for, which is kind of bullshit because like we always have events in that room and they've never had problems with it before. It's just the content of this. And even the way they shut it down is really, we tried to get AAUP involved in Syracuse because it was repression of academic discourse that the university did not want to have on its campus. And so after that, there was a few.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want American Association of University Professors. The folks just didn't recognize AAUP. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to be clear that folks. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So they shut down our event. They did say they will like help us reorganize it. They never really reached out to reorganize this event, and they just moved on. After that, there have been a few different initiatives. We have ESF is really close by, the Sunni Environmental Studies school. And so we've had collaborations between SU students and ESF students to do different kinds of teaching. So you had a lot of different organizations spring up, like Architects for Liberation, which are undergrad architects. You have 315 for Liberation, which is an org between SU and ESF. And so just because of the nature of the repression, students kind of started mobilizing across campus and more like teaching based, not involving admin, not promoting the events. Then eventually we had a Faculty for Justice for Palestine also emerge. Another like repressive thing that we saw was the Women and Gender Studies department, just because of the kinds of communications that were coming out from the administration, which really tried to frame this as an Israel-Hamas conflict and really tried to frame it without highlighting the genocide of Palestine or the Israeli apartheid state. And so the WGS department put out to its department basically an email, but really an academic resource as an email, kind of contextualizing what's happening in the region, and gave a list of resources for students to read and based on their expertise. And so that was really responded to at the administration level. The administration basically gave implicit warnings to stop doing anything like this, despite this actually being like the WGS department teaches about settler colonialism. It teaches about these things. And so it wasn't really off brand or like it wasn't political activism. It was just the department doing its job. But the university kind of responded with a warning. And this was also followed up by like doxing of the department chair, Himika Bhattacharya, and an attempt to dox people in the department and associated to the department. And so, and the university clearly did not try to protect the professors or anything like that. In fact, just refused to acknowledge what the dynamics, the power dynamics between who's getting doxxed and who's being doxxed. And so that has essentially been happening. And it's through that context, like there's been like events, Faculty for Justice of Palestine have been able to organize, like to host some poets from Palestine and, like some kind of basically different events, but really like nothing dealing with the reality of what we're seeing in Palestine right now, because the university refuses to talk about it in the exact terms. And so the encampment, I think, came from the fact that you had so many different groups on campus organizing for the same cause, Palestinian liberation, and attempt to understand what's happening in the region, because a lot of people are also like being in a university space are just trying to learn about these things instead of just take on the propaganda that's the school is taking. And so it came from an effort to like seeing what's happening across different campuses, I think. But once Columbus once Columbia and MIT and a few other schools started, I think all students were thinking, is this going to happen on campus? And I think it just took a few people to have a conversation about how we need to use the momentum to force the university into concessions. And so that's how we essentially got to it. And we started on April 29th. We stayed until May 15th. We lasted around 16 days. And I can talk about like what those 16 days look like. And I can also perhaps talk to you guys about our demands, but I'll stop there. So.
No, that's so. Just out of my own curiosity, and I'm sure there must be at least one other person thinking it. Like, what was that initial conversation like? So, you realize that there are all these groups on campus. Everyone's kind of having these internal conversations about the education and what the university is doing to suppress, and and I did, my own digging about how much stuff Syracuse is involved in as far as like the military and the DOJ, and like it's absurd in all honesty. But can you talk about like that and those initial conversations that said we're going to do this? Like, what did that look like?
Mm-hmm. So I can only talk to you because it's kind of like also I'm trying not to give enough information for anyone to make sense of how the groups are functioning, but it's a loose
don't give anything away that yeah.
Like, so it's kind of a loose coordination, right? And different people are in touch with different people. And so you have grads, you have undergrads, you have community groups that are all organizing and involved. And so it really was a matter of like different people who had contacts with different people being like, oh, we're down to do an encampment. We're down to do an encampment. So everybody verifying to each other. And at some point, us all deciding that we're going to get together and talk about if we do it, what will happen and how we want to do it. And so it was essentially, I think everybody, like, whoever is organizing for Palestine on campus, you've at least been to an event, you've seen them or something. So it was just a process where different people were talking about having it, and then there was a date where we decided to have a meeting and talk about whether or not it was viable.
And did y'all sneak on campus? Like, there's these videos of different places where people like sneaking up on campus with their stuff in the middle of the night. Is that? By the time I found out about it, it was up. So like, my own curiosity.
Yeah. So it was kind of, in some ways, you can also say some of it was spontaneous, but of course we had a plan of how the encampment was gonna. We had different groups that were gonna come from different directions. We did our homework in terms of like when DPS is on campus, when they have shifts, when they switch, so that we tried to go at a time where there was less police presence on campus. And so we also tried to think of a time that was like between classes, so we'd have enough traffic that they can't do anything super repressive in that moment. And so we like the decision of how we were gonna do the first encampment and like when was really like a strategic question of like when is the best time and like this kind of information, like what I'm telling you, like was being shared already. So by April 29, we already had information, like schools who would put up encampments were already sharing with us, like, don't do X and Y because X can lead to Y. Don't do X, or do this because this is what happened to us. And so what we were doing was also consistently trying to communicate with people in different encampments to get a sense of what is the best odds for us, and like relative to our own experience and the context in Syracuse University.
Could you talk a little? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Renee. No, my bad.
No. Go.
No, I did. I mean, you laid it out already, Mahdi. That the track that I'm certainly interested in is as well. So first the having gotten there, the encampment life, so to speak. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how that went, how you all sustained yourselves, and then what led to both. Because initially, right, Syracuse said that they demanded you all disband. You all said no, and then, but as Renee already said, you reached a conclusion that you would of your own choice disband. So could you talk about the living conditions and then what led to that decision, which I'm assuming would incorporate a discussion of the demands too? But yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about that in terms of basically what we are doing daily, what the everyday looked like, and also like what culminated to make our decision to leave. Also, our daily activities really were, we had assemblies. We had multiple assemblies throughout the day. This was when people in the encampment would get together to talk strategy, to talk demands, to talk revision, to talk moving forward. We also had like updates on the genocide in Gaza as part of all of our assemblies, so that we would never lose focus about why we were in that space. And then throughout the day, we'd have we had different working groups. Programming was one of our working groups. Programming was in charge of basically creating the run of the day for us. And so the intent was to not be idle at any point. So we did things from like inviting different people, like cultural workers in the community, to come speak to us, to come share their craft with us, to like have faculty who are confident and supportive of our movement to come do a teach-in. So we had teach-ins from like organizing 101, like professors who work on organizing, to like, I did one on Sudan, other grad students did one on their expertise, like some did Palestine 101. So we are doing all of these different things, within the same themes of imperialism. And so our day, like those were one of the things we're doing. Another thing we're doing is also we're inviting like cultural workers from the community. We had a Palestinian rapper come in, speak to us about his craft, but also his experience. We had a queer Palestinian come talk about their particular and specific experience. And we would have this program posted on our socials, and we would post it on like where we had a check-in space on the quad. We would post it there because the intention was to also have people just stop in and join these things. Like it was also like, as much as that occupying the space was a means to an end, it was also very much an end in and of itself, because what we were doing, we tried to take seriously.
Please forgive this again. I'm sorry again, but I'm just on the cultural part. So I am curious. Were because we saw like Macklemore had got a lot of
Yeah.
Did any, so aside from the people who came through to share their work, did any songs emerge as sort of anthemic, for the moment, anthems for the moment? Or was any? Did you all feel Macklemore? Were you all like moved by that? I don't know. I'm just curious. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Just curious.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think at least for the people I had discussions with, and when we played Macklemore, we did like the song. I mean, like it is a great song. I don't think anybody who's part of it right now can knock it. But I would say no, we didn't. So one thing that we were not allowed to do is use any kind of sound amplification. Yeah, so we use speakers, but like when it's in the middle of the quad, you can't hear it that much. And so what we didn't have was consistent music playing throughout the day. we didn't have that. We did have music, like we did our own, we had like chant hours where we'd get up and chant, or like it would be chant o'clock kind of, so that people would also be energized. We that in terms of our chants, like we also, this is another way of collaborating with other encampments. There's enough encampment people sharing chants. There was like we had an art working group will also create a chant specific to Syracuse. So one I think that an innovative undergrad came up with is like Joe Biden's alma mater is complicit in the slaughter. So like, you know, there was like attempts to do this, but not necessarily. I wouldn't say like, yes, this was the theme we were vibing with and this song played. And you know, we had a Palestinian playlist, and we had different people contribute to it who actually knew music. I am not one of those. Yeah, so that
no, right, right. I
yeah.
derailed you. Sorry.
No worries. So that's kind of like how the days went by, is between workshops, teach-ins, assemblies, debriefs, and then that's how our days. And we always did dinner collectively. We always did lunch collectively. Along, like, a part of like for your question of how do we sustain ourselves, honestly, this had a lot to do with who was supporting us. We had much more support than we had opposition. Our opposition was really limited to the administration and Zionist parents and students, right? Whereas our support ranged from like campus-based organizations to community organizations to like community institutions, like different masjids who are coming and providing lunch for us every day. We had community restaurants bringing in food for us daily. We had faculty literally sign their name and support our cause and send a letter to administration. We also had organized for students who are lazy, or staff and faculty who don't want to write their own letters, a system where you could just sign your name to, and we got over 4,000 letters signed to admin. And so we had over like 8 campus-based organizations put out solidarity statements with the encampment and the demands. We had, and 8 are those who said we support the calls for the demands. And we had more than 8 just support freedom of speech and freedom of assembly for the right of the encampment to exist. But you know, the graduate student union, for instance, put out a statement supporting the encampment and the goals to divest and disclose. Yeah, so that was essentially how we sustained ourselves, is the fact that we had support. We had different teams working on resource and logistics so that we made sure how we were going to run. Like, we had breakfast coming in, lunch coming in, dinner coming in, but that had a lot to do with the community had our back each and every time, even at times where they threatened to remove us with force, or like they would come back or something. We called on the community to show up, and without fail the community showed up. Even a few days after our encampment began, we held the community organized a solidarity rally. So this is people, organizations like the Syracuse Peace Council, the Jewish Voice for Peace and stuff are organizing solidarity rallies to come and like stand in solidarity with students. So I think one of actually the greatest wins from our encampment was is that your Syracuse University, it is one of the institutions that really reproduces the social structures in Syracuse, right? It's part gentrifier, it's part elitist, it separates students from this very exploited community that we live in, and the poverty effect. No, like, you can talk to an average Syracuse University student, chances are they don't know how desperate the living and working conditions in Syracuse are, you know? So I think the strength and our largest win was like, we had direct access to our community. We depended on them, they depended on us, and we didn't. So we kind of the administration kind of attempts to create a bubble, the university itself, like, and you have housing structures all across the university that are safe, but you're encouraged not to go outside of that bubble, and you're told to function within that. And like, this encampment was really able to break those barriers. Yeah. I'll stop there, and maybe then I can go into the demands. However,
yeah, I put it. Hopefully that's the right link and it works in the chat if you want to pull the demands up, and then we can talk about those. So
this is it, correct?
So yeah, that's an infographic we created for one of our demands. We had 6 demands. Our first demand was support for a ceasefire. We wanted the university to publicly call for a ceasefire. We saw no reason to why it should not, because the day, literally less than 24 hours after Russia invaded Ukraine, they put out a statement saying they are with the people of the world who want peace and condemn the invasion of Russia, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We wanted them to put out a very similar thing, that they are calling for a ceasefire because they stand with the world that wants to stop the genocide of Palestinians, but they were unwilling to engage it. Our second demand was ethical investments, and so we wanted ethical investments is like basic. We wanted the university to disclose its investments and its relations with financial relations with different companies that are complicit in the genocide. And Syracuse University has very tight relations with Lockheed Martin, the #1 weapons manufacturer, which the American Friends Service Committee has identified is directly complicit in this genocide. We have, I'm sure some of the buildings on campus are built by Lockheed. Yeah, and then we had also Boeing. Syracuse is not shy about having relationship with these corporations, and so we wanted it to disclose what kinds of financial relations it had, and we wanted it to redirect to ethical investments. The one you had just pulled up is demand 3, which is ethical collaborations and our honorings. Essentially, we wanted an immediate termination and a stop to programs that are academic programs that have affiliations with Israeli academic and security institutions. We were especially targeting the Institute for National Security and Counterterrorism, which has now been renamed the Institute for Security Policy and Law, and because it has numerous programs that normalize militarization and apartheid, right? And this including one of its programs, which is the Program on Security in the Middle East. So the infographic you just pulled up also just lists the different programs that have direct relations with study abroad programs that take people to Israel, completely normalize apartheid, completely don't talk about the conditions of Palestinian people, make them take pictures of the IOF soldiers and bring them back. So that was demand 3, ethical collaborations. And and we also wanted the university to rethink giving honorary doctorates and stuff, because the lawyer that was defending Israel at the ICJ when the South Africans took it to court had been given a Syracuse University honorary doctorate. We wanted them to reconsider these kinds of affiliations as well.
Wait, hold on. I gotta ask a question. Was that given before or after the?
After that? It was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lordy.
Yeah. And then demand 4 was protection of student rights, which is, amnesty for protesters, support for freedom of speech and assembly. This is essentially because what we've been seeing, one thing that I haven't told you guys is when, since October 7, one of the things that happened was there was a big protest organized by students. And I think over 100 people marched for Palestine. I think this had to be in November, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just a pro-Palestine protest, and the university had sent out an email basically warning students use of calling, because some of the students called out Hillel on campus and its affiliation to the Israeli state. So the email that was sent out was really to warn us about oh, you're attacking, you're being anti-Semitic. And they warned the FBI has already been involved and we won't be afraid to involve them more. So essentially it's just putting the cops on Black and brown students who are protesting for the right side of history.
Were there claims at Columbia that the protesters were threatening Jewish students and harassing?
100%. And I'll share with you guys, I don't know if you want, but we have a press packet we gave to press that listed some of the egregious harassments. That was it. They were consistently they didn't want us to use the word intifada. They said that was harassment. That was calling for, yeah. I mean, this in a university that has a linguistics department and teaches Arabic, so this just how egregious it is. And so the protection for protection of students' rights comes from like protection of Black and brown students, of Muslim students, of Arab students who are especially being targeted, but are being drowned under false harassment accusations, which is what's been happening, right? TAs are being accused of anti-Semitism and X and Y, the same way everybody else is being accused of anti-Semitism. So that protection of student rights was basically because we saw that they weren't. And one thing I didn't tell you guys, when they did shut down our first event, when we tried to bring a Professor Rabab, afterwards the FBI did contact some of the student organizers, went to their houses. Yeah. So it is also, we are aware that the university, and we know the university is aware of this too.
I'm sorry, you're saying the FBI went to the students where the students reside, or to their homes?
Where they reside here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of the graduate student organizers of that event were like, yeah. And it was nothing out of pocket, right? Like it was just another event, but it was just a topic was out of pocket. Yeah, and our last demand was our fifth demand is protection of academic freedom. And so this is, we want them to teach about settler colonialism. We want them to not call it the Israel-Hamas conflict. We want them to call it what it is. We have academic works that can describe exactly what is happening, and they were refusing to do that. The events that they had on the Israel-Hamas conflict were really like one-sided and disproportionately representative of the side that we're fighting against. So protection for academic freedom, essentially, because we have been lacking protection is why we have it out there. And then our last demand is addressing DPS racism. DPS is the Department of Public Safety on campus. They've been racist. Not Again SU has called them out. This is the movement of Black students a few years back in SU. Even before that, you had the I forget their name, another student movement that also called out DPS, is that these are the system of that they have in place is racist, is anti-Arab, is Islamophobic. And I can tell you guys personal stories, but also there's a lot of former work that's been done by organizations like Not Again SU that show DPS racism. And I mean, DPS is moving around like claiming that you need to remove Intifada because it is harassment to other students, and basically who they protect. And the question of racism and Islamophobia is really the question at the larger scale: who gets to be killed, who gets to be harassed, who gets sanctioned, who gets that. So we wanted to tie this back in, because like all of the things that we're demanding is tied to Islamophobia and racism that we're trying to fight, essentially.
By the way, the comment that shows on that Instagram with whoever answered, like, this is theater, you all live on stolen, your school is on stolen land, as if Syracuse being on stolen land means like you have to ignore what's happening anywhere else in the world. Like it is such a bizarre argument to make, to be like, you should shut up because Syracuse is built on top of the Onondaga Nation. Like everyone's aware of that, and so it's just
while condemning wild settler colonial genocide.
Right.
Right. So the claim is, right, that that's being said to us because the claim is Israel itself is a land back project. So yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I saw that in one of the videos. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Israel is not a settler colonial state. It's viewed as like, yeah. So that is literally, we had students come up to us and say, you are so dumb. If you support land rights, then this is the most effective like land back project we've had worldwide. So that is part of it. Yeah. Outside of the harassment that we got, calling us terrorists and dumb people.
So so we can pull one of those up, because Mahi was kind enough to share some actual on-site video of
and I think I just shared with you some
people acting crazy. So in that folder, Jared, the one that's called Zionist Woman, I tried to name them so I could find them easily.
Or can we coin a Zarin, a Zionist Karen? Is that what this is about to be? A
Ooh,
Zarin?
there we go.
Can we? Is that what
100%.
this
I
is?
love it.
Seriously, anybody want to tell me what you're fighting for? Free Palestine? Are you insane? Tell Hamas that. Tell Hamas it's keeping you down. Hamas, who you let rule you for 20 fucking years like a bunch of idiots. Rise up. It's not us. We're not occupiers, idiots. You can leave Gaza. I can't come into Gaza.
Oh wow!
As a matter of fact, if you have a medical issue, come to Israel and actually take care of our fucking enemies. Because that's how fucking insane we are.
Why go to school on stolen land if it's so important to you? Why? Israel isn't
Does
stolen.
he have no sense of indigenous?
It is. It is
Indigenous?
the most successful operation of land back ever.
Oh, there it is.
Ever.
She's not a student. She's not a student. She's not a student.
None of them are students from Ayala. None of them. Look at all of them. Unless they all are that stupid, they got kept back. And they just pay 80,000, 80,000, 80,000 every fucking year. Oh, I forgot. They go for free. I'm the only idiot that pays 80,000.
Wow!
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I hope you notice the multiple tropes she's like using, right? Like she's not just saying like, oh, the Hamas. So she's also saying that students, the black and brown students that she sees in front of them, are not paying students. Like, so it's just so interesting how all of these tropes are like coherent in their language and their expressions.
it really is. It's pretty amazing, and it made me think. There's another one, Jared, called there's actually only 3 videos, so it's the last video that we haven't shown yet. I think it's Man and Jewish Student, I think, which I named because of what you.
Yeah, so I don't think the video I shared with you shows him like flipping over our salad bar.
No.
But you can show him so that I can give you a bit of detail on who that man is, because
all right.
You said man with Jewish student.
I think it's Man with Jewish Student. Yep.
Come on, open. All right, here we go. Hold on. There we go.
Jews in the way. Jews in the way. Zionists in the way. Are you refusing my right of way? I need to walk. You're a student here? You look kind of old to be a student, you know? Okay, wait.
Sorry. Jewish student. The TPS is trying to talk to you about you though.
The hand wringing though, I can't.
You love America? Do you love this country? No? Anybody love this country here? Anybody pro-American here? Can we love America on our side? You love America? Think it's a great country?
Yeah.
And you said he does something.
So this guy is like exemplifies the connection of SU to like Zionism and like how it works too, right? Because this guy is so central. Like, first of all, it's important to tell you guys to like why DPS racism is on our list is the fact that he was like inside the encampment. The video that you guys are seeing is about like after 20 minutes of him flipping over some food from our food table, going around and basically like getting in people's faces, asking them like things. So all of this is happening and DPS is watching. We have students go up to DPS at this point and ask DPS like, why aren't you doing anything? And they're like, it's not cause for anything. We all know if the shoe was on the other like feet and it was us going to a space that was considered Jewish Zionist space and do anything that we would have automatically been sanctioned. So they let him go around the encampment, harass people for 40 minutes, but then he starts getting super disrespectful, even with DPS themselves. And that's when they have to put handcuffs on him because he refuses to like stop doing what he's doing. And they charge him for trespassing and remove him from campus, right?
Is that Eric Adams's guy?
Yes.
Oh,
This is Eric Adams's guy. There was a New York Times article about his arrest. That article,
Jared, you have the links. You have the New York Times article, and you have the Daily Orange article.
Yeah, and both articles don't do justice to show like the importance of this dude, right? Because partly, like Renee, I sent you a tweet by the Israeli ambassador to the UN. I don't know if you saw it, but the Israeli ambassador for the UN had tweeted about the SU encampment, calling it a Hamas encampment and saying that it needs to end.
Right. So the tweet, once we show the articles, Jared, the tweet is in our private chat.
Yeah, and our assumption is like tweets like this, like why heavy hitters such as the like Israeli ambassador is tweeting, is because of parents like Ron Tarosian, who's the guy who was walking around. So Ron Tarosian is the president of the USA Board of American Friends of Duvdevan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that accurately, but I'll put it in the chat. And basically, Duvdevan is actually an organization. It's an organization that supports Unit 217 of the Israeli military. It's the Duvdevan unit. It's an elite special operations force and known for its undercover missions in densely populated areas in Palestine. And what they are known for is disguising themselves as Palestinians, to conduct like extrajudicial killings, kidnappings, extensive surveillance operations. And so I'm sure like everybody knows the Palestinian American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and how she was extrajudicially killed. It was this unit, the Duvdevan unit, that was implicated for her murder. And so this guy, Tarosian, is the president of the USA Board of American Friends of Duvdevan, right? Aside from that, aside from like institutional financial support, he embraces, like he is openly Zionist and he openly embraces it. He once said to a spokesperson for the Aish HaTorah in New York that he thinks, and this is a quote, that quote, thinks that we should kill 100 Arabs or 1,000 Arabs for every one Jew they kill. So this is a person who like comfortably says this, and as you see, comfortably claims Zionism. He is also the co-founder of an organization called Our Jerusalem. It's a nonprofit that works to push Palestinian citizens out of Palestinian citizens of Israel out of Jerusalem. And so you have other, co-founders like Danny Danon, who's Israel's former ambassador to the UN, and different and Yael Hassan, who was advisor for Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who later became the president. And so just like to show you, like he is at the, like what you would call at the heart of the lobby groups, of the Zionist lobby groups. He also he's one of the members of a Zionist parent organization on campus. His daughter is also, she says she is head of an organization in support of Israel, but really is part of, she's been known for sending harassing emails to Arab students, threatening them. She's been known, even when that event I mentioned to you guys early on was shut down, she came to the African American Studies Department and demanded that they take down posters and do X and Y. So she's been harassing people as well. But who he is really this guy with a lot of relations in Washington, but also direct relations to the Israeli occupation forces.
That is a wildly deep, like that is deep. Do you see the Twitter post?
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Like this guy is also CEO or CFO of like a PR company. And that
Yeah,
PR
that drew my
Yeah.
attention immediately. Like,
Yeah.
that's deep. So yeah, please, sorry, I of course cut you off when I'm asking you to elaborate, but yeah.
No, and I didn't like, so what I told you guys so far is by research, people who've been doing part of the encampment have been doing research on him, and his PR company is under the Sinclair Group. And under the Sinclair Group is also media companies like Syracuse.com, which has been reporting on our encampment. And so, it just shows you yet another level of how these things are systematically related and reinforce each other and how they work. Like Syracuse.com, relative to the others, did not have like the best articles when they did. Some of the articles that they did were really good, but some were very limited. And for me, it speaks to the financial relations that they have.
And I'm sure in the folder is the follow-up to this tweet where you include all the evidence that he included of these threats against Jewish students in this tweet, right? You're going to tell me where to click, Renee, to find that in a second? Because I mean, he claimed it, so there must be evidence. And I know if there was, you both would have brought it. So I'm just waiting for the instruction to click on something, because he's claiming that violence and threats have been brought to Syracuse against Jewish students as a result of the encampment. So it must be true, because no PR specialist, is gonna. Okay, all right.
Yeah. I mean, and so another person like Tarasian, who was coming in to our encampment every day, who, like, anytime we had like a protest or an action, would be there to like film or to try to dox people, is Ari Spinoza. And this guy has been like affiliated to Congressman Brandon Williams, and Congressman Brandon Williams has been making several tweets condemning the encampment, and he also even introduced a bill that would make student protesters who've been charged basically ineligible for student loan relief. So Ari Spinoza, this guy who's been his campaign manager and who's worked closely on his campaign with Congress, this guy is basically had been coming almost every day to the encampment to film people, and
that's it right there. That tells you everything you need to know right there. That's
It always does.
It always
does. So what this made me think of, like watching him, and I don't know if that was his daughter, if it was just another random student who was walking through the encampment with him, was all these videos that people are posting of, Jewish people walking into the middle of the encampment and yelling, right? Because they don't.
She was saying safe. Jewish student, right? Was she saying?
Yes, she was saying Jewish student. And I always chuckle to myself when I see those, because there's Jewish students part of the encampment, right?
Right.
Mind you, a large part of the encampment was Jewish students. Like, we're in Syracuse. We're a predominantly white institution. Our students are predominantly like white, and so you have in any situation. And our encampment, I would say, it was reflective of the Syracuse experience, because you did see those numbers reflected. And also, it's a question of safety and security. Like, Arab students, non-American students don't feel safe protesting. They've been seeing what's happening. The amount of support we had from students, but students did not want to come to the encampment, is massive. And I think that's another one that we had, is us realizing it is the problem of sanctioning and repression that people are fearing, and that's why they're not standing up. It is not that they do not share the sentiments that more vocal students and faculty have been fighting for. And so when I told you guys we had more support than we had opposition, is that we had support from the overwhelming, predominantly white majority institution we are placed in, but we also have support from like much more minority groups who are not safe and who are not protected enough to mobilize in these ways.
It's wild. So I did, and this was not at Syracuse University, but I just felt like this was like a priceless. It was just, this is what happens, right? So the YouTube clip in column C on the encampment arrests is a woman calling 911 from in the middle of an encampment, and it's just so silly.
Is this another Zarin? It's a Zarin.
It is.
Nobody is going to hurt them. Nobody is going to attack them. This person is not in harm's way.
They are free to leave.
Nobody is going to hurt them. Nobody is going to attack them. This person is not in harm's way.
Yes, they're right in front of me right now. This person
is
He
not.
literally looks like the one that called the cops on the brother in Central Park.
Yeah.
They even look alike.
No, you are free to move. You are free to move. She is free to move.
Please help me.
She's free to move. She's free to leave. She is free to leave. No one is surrounding her. She is free to leave.
Wait, she's surrounded with a big gap behind her.
Right. And the dog is just chilling.
They're surrounding me.
She's free to leave. No one is surrounding her.
No one is
Now they're ganging up on her.
I'm just walking my dog. I need help.
She's free to leave.
Man.
I'm a Jewish American. I need help. Please come and help me.
I'm a Jewish American. I need help.
I'm wearing a white Adidas shirt. I have a dog with me. I need help.
Wow.
You can't make it up, yeah. You can't make it up.
I mean, most of the harassment claims that it's like students would come to our encampment, write down signs, like, look at what we're doing, and then go report like a harassment. Like, I feel unsafe because of X and Y. So like, this is just on brand.
It's so...
Yeah. But, we had the way the encampment was working, we had admin like surveilling us. They were posted up in different corners like throughout the day, especially the 12-hour day. And during the night, it would be mostly DPS, like they'd be on top of buildings or things like that, and around the different buildings. I think for admin throughout the day that were like there to surveil us, I think some of them by the end of it really like understood who was the harasser and who wasn't, because every day we had harassers like make a point to come up to us, to come say shit, to do something, to insult us and things like this. Like it like people were spitting on people. Some students have been spit on during the night, especially evenings, and DPS watches, they don't stop them at anything. We had students come up and like blast music, be like, cowards, you need to wake up. All of this is happening and DPS doesn't do anything. So just the who is the harasser has been really clear. And I think Syracuse is different in that we must be one of the only encampments where you had a Zionist arrested.
But also it says a lot, right? Like if their behavior is so out of control that they actually get arrested, I mean, they must have really like crossed some, because it takes a lot for them to be seen as like problematic, right? Because just like you were saying, like all this stuff is happening, and DPS has always been a problem, frankly, at Syracuse. Like historically, I was there in the 90s, they weren't fun then, and so like it's always been a problem. And so if it got to a point where they actually put him in handcuffs, he must have been totally out of control, because it takes that, it has to be so egregious for him to actually be escorted off campus. And I'm interested to see what happens after that, right? Like, there was these little articles, he got arrested, very much downplaying his own behavior, really like kind of quoting him and making him appear as if he was trying to do something to the benefit of Jewish students and for the safety of his daughter and yada yada yada. So I'm curious to see, like, is there any follow-up? Like, does he actually have to come back and go to court, or is he going to be another person who the charges are going to quietly get dropped and there's going to be no follow-up? Because it would not be the same if it had been the other way around, right? Like that. Mm-hmm. There's no way, if it had been a Black and brown student who was behaving that way at a, Jewish student Zionist event, who got pulled off in handcuffs, and probably for less than what that man was doing at the point when he was arrested, it would be total follow-up, right? Like they'd have to go through the whole process before anything came to a conclusion, and who knows how far that the system would have dragged that on for a Black or brown student. So I'm curious to see how, has there been, to your knowledge, anything, like, is he actually going to be expected to show at a court date? Do you know anything about?
I actually do not, but I do know that because we were thinking of charging him, like if it was something that we could do on our own. And I do know that when it was happening, the DPS sergeant was there, like when he was acting out, was there.
And what was he doing? I'm not clear. I'm sorry. What was he doing?
He was watching. Actually, at one of
No, I'm saying, what was the guy doing that you're talking about? What was the acting out that this guy was doing?
He's like flipping our food off the table. He's like walking up to students' faces and being like, "Oh, are you in support of Hamas?" Like, he's just being aggressive. Right. He's like moving some of the tents around and like saying, "I'm not gonna get off. Like, I demand you guys shut this down," and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I did see, Renee, in that story you had in the run sheet from The Intercept, that and for a second I got confused with which was being discussed here, because this postdoctoral research fellow at Arizona State is one of the few apparently pro-Israel supporters that has been removed. But what I didn't like, what I thought was sort of incomplete about this article, was that this is somebody who apparently gets in the face of a woman in the hijab who says her religious boundaries are being violated, and Yildirim replies, "You disrespect my sense of humanity, bitch," and stuff like that. And what I see pro-Palestinian folks getting harassed for doesn't equate. It's like it's not an equivalence here. They're not running up in people's faces and calling people's names and similar to what I see here, threatening people in violent ways, and yet they're being punished. So that was the only issue I had with that article. It seemed to suggest that there is, even in few instances, this false equivalence and balance between people even on the right getting in trouble with their universities. But this guy seems to have done so much more than what anyone in defense of Palestine has been accused of doing, and yet so anyway, that's what I just wanted to clarify. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So Mahi might not realize. So there's in the run sheet, and I tried to drop you all the links, but it was like right before we got started, Mahi. So don't worry about not reading them. But in the run sheet is an article that was posted in The Intercept, and it's an article that follows some stories about professors who have been put on leave or have lost their job regarding, this repression that's happening on campuses all over the place. And this stood out to me because this to me is like the overarching thing that's happening, right? Like you have professors who are being placed on leave, you have students who are being suspended, you have campuses having walls put up around them. Like you have all of this repression that's happening literally across the country, followed by like violence, and then followed by arrests, which are going to result in years and years and years of being trapped within this system. And there's another article that we can, move to later. But Jared, do you want to kind of talk about what you found in this article?
Sure. Well, the first thing, so I started with a critique, but to be fair to the article and to the author, whose name is Natasha Lennard, I want to say that I love the way they started here. Many scholars committed to Palestinian liberation can no longer do their job. That's because many of the professors most supportive of Palestine don't have jobs anymore. This is nowhere truer than in the Gaza Strip, where all 12 universities have been reduced to rubble. So it's a nice little setup because it's like inviting for people like me to start getting worried, and then all of a sudden you're reminded that nah, son, your issues are nowhere close to the fact that all the universities in Gaza have been reduced to rubble. But then they do go through and track, and I'll just for the sake of time, I mean, what stood out to me is, as much as anything, is that as I said, faculty are not as free and liberated as is often suggested is the case. And so a lot of people are losing their jobs and being harassed, including people with tenure. which again, admittedly, for people like me, is that much more of an alarm that what is nominally supposed to protect your intellectual freedom is being is in fact mythology, largely connected to what has nothing to do with your academic work. So they're talking a lot of what they talk about in this article are the extracurricular commentary from faculty that has nothing to do with their careers and has everything to do with their social media presence and their support for activism and students and others. And of course, as the article mentions, a lot of it has to do with big time funders calling the university and saying, get rid of these people. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot more to say, but I don't want to take up too much more time unless you all want to. I mean, but yeah, that was what initially stood out to me was that a lot of faculty are losing their jobs even after 18 years and even with tenure and having had nothing to do with their. And just very quickly, years ago when I looked at the case of Ward Churchill and the academic assault on him and accusations of plagiarism, and I read all this work, one of the things that came out was that theoretically, at least, nominally at least, you cannot be targeted for what you say as a faculty member if what you say has nothing to do with your immediate field. So one of the cases that was cited was that there was a professor in something like mathematics or something like that who was a Holocaust denier. But because his field was not in anything related to history or ethnic studies or religion or whatever, and was related to mathematics, he was actually protected in telling the world, I don't believe that the Holocaust ever happened, but I'm a math professor, so you can't. So I just find all of this interesting, given the way all of these, again, nominal rules don't seem to exist anymore if you are in defense of Palestine and calling out Zionism and genocide. All rules are, so I'm sorry, it was longer than I intended, but
no, but I'm glad you went through it, because I shared that article specifically because one of the conversations that Mahi and I had was about kind of the change that happened amongst the faculty and some of the things that, you know, started to show as people started to come to the encampment and started to have these conversations. And as everyone knows, I work in a high school, and one of the things that I've seen just in public education, you know, in the high school level in general, is a real lack of education, a real lack of conversation, and an outright, like, there's no interest in it. There's not even like, you know, a proposal of having a conversation that could engage students in learning about what's happening and why things are happening the way they are. And what instead I've seen at multiple places is like outright repression and refusal to allow the students to have a voice, the students to ask questions. The teachers are uncomfortable answering questions. They don't want to talk about it. I mean, I know history teachers who won't even touch the topic because they don't want to lose their job, right? And the thing that I keep saying over and over again is, how is it that we've gotten to a place where people are so afraid of even touching a topic that we would prefer for all the students to remain ignorant? Like, how does that, how does that help anything? Like, how do we get to a place where people can have an actual, like, educated conversation about the history and all these things when people are not even allowed to broach the topic because they're afraid of what the consequences are going to be? Like, it's wild to me. But Mahi, I want you to talk a little bit about, like,
I was going to say, don't worry, we can wait for the next Kyrie or Ye interview. We'll get them to ask them to answer for us. Yeah.
But Mahi, do you want to talk about, like, the professors and kind of what you encountered on campus as far as, like, dealing with the faculty and the professors at Syracuse?
Yeah. To be honest, in terms of faculty on campus, we do have a faculty of justice for Palestine. It's just become a faculty and staff for Justice for Palestine group. They've been supporting us. When students did go, encampment folks did go to talk to admin, they had faculty advocates. We had different people from like political science department, African American studies department. We had some faculty who were willing to, tenured and untenured, who are willing to be in this space and be identified alongside students and who are comfortable with that. But earlier on, like when I mentioned to you guys, the WGS and a department putting out something, Himika Bachatara, who was the head of the department, the chair of the department at that point, she got a lot of like doxing, a petition to have her removed. The parents wrote letters to have her removed. And even in terms of the encampment, we are aware that there is a counter demand sheet that Zionist parents have given to administration. So we do know, like at every point there is an attempt to like who whether it's Zionist parents and students or it's more larger groups as part of the SU admin. People that we might not know are behind the scenes. We are very aware of the fact that like at every turn there is an attempt to sanction students and faculty. But faculty that did come, some did not want to be identified with us. Then they told us that clearly. Some said they were nervous about how this would position them, and they could not secure their jobs. They did not have tenure. They could not be guaranteed. Some were afraid of their departments. Not even administration, but the department, because we have Zionist professors as well that are tenured and have been with us a long time. So I think in Cornell, Russell Rickford, I think an upstate, like that was one of the first people that we saw was like sanctioned outwardly. Like after that, like in Syracuse University, at least we haven't heard of anything outside of people taking it upon themselves to dox faculty or to put up their profiles on Canary Mission. Nothing we've seen directly. But it's implicit in everything, right? You had TAs who were told not to talk about it. Like how do you do that? Especially I'm a political science teaching assistant. How do I go into a classroom and then when I'm asked about these questions, not discuss it? Or we were given like ridiculous, like how to address conflict in the classroom sheets to deal with something this deep. Which is ridiculous. I mean, I appreciate people trying to help us, but it was really not helpful. And I mean, TAs were being like Zionist students were complaining about TAs. So TAs were being called in by departments and being like individually sanctioned. Be like, oh, we understand, like, yeah, there's some effect, but still don't do it since you've already been like accused of harassment. So what they've been doing is dealing with it in individualized ways where there isn't a collective action or effort or understanding of what's happening at the university level. But I know from friends like that are peers and from like faculty I have good relationships with, like, I mean, nobody is comfortable saying something, and like nobody, the concept of academic freedom is, it's at the level of a concept at this point. Its materiality is really subjective.
I want to hit the bars button, but I just feel like it's so sad to do it for that. It's just, listen. It's just, I mean, it's just, because that is really it. Yeah.
I do want to say, like, I loved when Columbia, like the day they got raided by like 300 like cops or whatever, they put out this like statement. I love how clear it was. Like, this is just one reflection of the descent into fascism in this country, right? Like the McCarthyism, the suppression and repression of students, like unarmed, nonviolent students. Just it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous time we're in, but it's also very characteristic about the trajectory of this country and the globe and fascist forces on the globe. The normalization of these things, and what is truth, what is objectivity.
And I gotta say, so there's an article in there also about the amount of arrests that have happened, and literally my jaw hit the floor because I don't think I even understood how bad it was, right? And for you all, you told me that, there was a point where you thought that this was going to be like a takedown, and so you called the community in and they supported you all, and that prevented it from getting to this step. but I shared this article because there's like it's hundreds and thousands of students and
More than
people who are
2,900.
simply,
Mhm.
it's crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
I
And
thought
you're
the New York
also,
Times was biting your map, by the way, but yeah. Mm.
yeah. It's also more crazy. I think people should be nervous about the fact that like some of these universities are where your 1% go. So we've moved from the era of like, okay, you're being targeted because you're black and brown, you're being targeted because you're a woman, like because of these different dynamics that make you more less powerful in certain spaces. It's anybody. Everybody's gonna get it as long as they stand against this or they stand for this is what's happening, which is very characteristic of fascism in my opinion, because it's like even crossing the class boundaries at this point, right?
It does look like that's a good point. I mean, it's just, this is just a list of, I mean, almost all of these universities are relatively elite.
Right. And if you scroll down, Jared, it breaks it down like with numbers. And so this was like I was seriously, and it's almost silly to be like I couldn't believe it, but I just wasn't expecting it to be this long and so many different places and so many different, and when you look at the list of schools, these are not, these are not small time, like, like unknown HBCUs. Like, these are big name schools that students are chomping at the bit. Like, the University of Virginia, for it being a public school that likes to pretend like it's an Ivy League. Like, I mean, it's wild to me that they had 25 people get arrested on campus, right? Like,
well, Thomas Jefferson did say he wanted a university in the South that rivaled Harvard that was pro-slavery. So, I mean, it is doing his thing all these years later, But yeah, no, it's crazy. And there are no HBCUs. I mean, at some point, I want to really revisit this, especially looking at my student project from the end of this past semester related to that question. Where they were asked to interview fellow students as to why they thought HBCUs were not involved. And I think that is a whole separate set of or maybe not, but maybe for an additional conversation. Why are HBCUs? They're not on this list primarily because they're not involved. They're not, or not at the same way in the same level. And I'm not saying they don't have good reason or reasons, but it's a somewhat, to me, obviously a fascinating nuance in all of this.
And it's to me disheartening, right? Like for all the conversations about how important it is for our Black students to pursue their education at an HBCU because that's the only place where they're going to be able to get this type of experience, and they didn't do this, right? Like, I think Emory was as close as it got. And there were students from HBCUs who got arrested at Emory, but they had to go to Emory in order to participate in something that was going to be pro-Gaza. And I'll at least give some credit due to the students at Morehouse when they found out that Biden was going to be speaking at the commencement and getting an honorary diploma from Morehouse. Like, what is happening? That they at least, like, tried to do something, but even then it was very, in my opinion, like very low key. Like, it wasn't, I feel like the only, right. And he spoke, they didn't stop it. The students sat there and listened. They played him a little bit with the thing they held up behind him while his speech was going. But in the end, there was not like this massive, like, turning over of what the hell is going on. Why is this man on our campus when he is supporting, literally in all means possible, the genocide of an entire population of people? Like, how does that happen? And why is an HBCU supporting this? And it's all like, Hyman says it, like, they're like playing in our face, right? Like, we're talking about how important it is for Black people to stand with Palestine and to understand that all the things that happen in Palestine simply trickle over, right? They cross the ocean and they come here, and then they utilize those same tactics, those same chemicals, those same, everything, and they do it to Black and brown people here in the US. And the fact that, Morehouse took this stance in this moment to decide that this was the thing that they were going to do, to me, says a lot, right? Like, it says a lot that they were like, nah, we doing it. We're good. We're going to bring him here and he's going to speak, and our students are going to sit and they're going to listen. Like, I mean, did students walk out? Like, I didn't see any videos of like students.
Yeah.
Did students walk out?
Yeah, some kind of like stood up and like gave them their back. I think the valedictorian also, like in his speech, called for a ceasefire. And one of the faculty raised up like a Congo flag.
Yeah, had a thing behind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, different.
But
elements.
I mean, Jerry Seinfeld got walked out on by like dozens of people, right? They like got up and they left in the middle of their own graduation in their caps and gowns. They dipped when he came to the stage.
But I think in I think Xavier University, which I believe is an HBCU, they managed to get to petition to get I think Linda Thomas Greenfield, the UN rep, who's been like basically denouncing and refusing to accept the ceasefire resolutions. They managed to petition to not have her come to speak. And I think they threatened protest and stuff like that. So there has been movement. I know in Howard there's been protests. I think the question of an encampment is a question of like which first of all, it's about the level of organization on campuses before October 7th, right? Like how well do different campuses organize on political issues? And I think that's one thing. Another question is repression. Is that who is willing, like, who can face repression and can survive it is also a question. And so, I think we should interrogate why HBCUs don't have encampments, but I will say, like, it's not like they're not participating. I don't think so. I have friends in Clark Atlanta University. They were going to come join our encampment for the summer had we continued. So I think it's like less about the sentiment among Black students, more about just the level of organization, the capacity, the nature of the university structure, all of these things that matter. Most of the universities where we're seeing like robust organizing is like they've had a Student for Justice for Palestine for a long time. They've had certain institutions in place that they could use right now to leap and join this moment. But if like a university like Syracuse, we're still very much mobilizing. There's not an SJP. There's not. So our encampment was reflective of our disorganization in our past and the level of SU's repression to anything autonomous, students creating anything politically autonomous. So.
No, absolutely well said. And at Morgan, there's definitely been some involvement on some level, but again, in terms of the sustained encampment and large even protests, they've had to go elsewhere to find an outlet for that energy. But that's anyway, yeah, definitely something we'll look more into.
I'd be curious because everything you're saying is correct, but why doesn't it exist is the question still, right? Like, if you are at an HBCU and you are mostly comprised of Black and brown people, right, who their entire lives have had some sense of oppression, whether they want to admit to that or not, they've all seen or heard or lived something, right? Like, how is it that you don't have something organized on your campus to stand up in the face of oppression so that when something happens and there's a call to action, you can do something, right? Like, it should exist, right? Like,
but I think the same way that you ask the question about Black students at HBCUs is the same thing to ask Black people in Black communities. That same oppression exists there, and there's still struggles to be an adequate level of organized response for a variety of even good reasons. And that's sort of, so I think that actually is exacerbated on a lot of these HBCU campuses, particularly like those like more like Morgan and other of the I guess I don't want to say it this way publicly, but the reality of that sort of second and third tier of HBCUs. There's differences in class, there's differences in what is expected of those students, and what is aspirational is even. I think there are differences there. So yeah, I'm not meaning to excuse. I am meaning more to look into to why and to explain why. But I think. And then these institutions are wildly socially conservative. So in some ways, even more so than PWIs. So and our students have been threatened, as was the case at Morehouse and others. Like there's been directives from the president, several reminding students of what is and is not acceptable and what students can expect should they engage in what's not. Some students have been sanctioned already for even disrupting any students walk through one of the campus event days holding signs and calling for a ceasefire and for Morgan to separate and divest, and not so much divest, but separate ties with Israel. And some of those students have been, again, sanctioned, threatened, and so on. So
yeah. And I think one of the things that we did, like when we were doing the encampment throughout the process, like we were super aware of the fact that like white students would have to move differently than like non-white students, because we just don't have the same, like, first, we're not viewed the same, like our human nature is not viewed the same by those who view us. We were very clear about that when we were organizing together. We were clear about like if there would be police presence to like remove us, how we would not have Black and brown bodies at the front. We had different systems to identify people who would be like organizing with us but would leave if any kind of real repression came, because these are people with different immigration status, these are people who have dependents and people who depend on them financially. So there are all of these questions, and in a place like an HBCU, I think they become compounded, right? Like it's also a question of like who is there to teach you about these things and to understand it. The Black Panther Party put out a few different pieces trying to understand what was happening during 1967 war and everything. Like which Black youth organizations, which radical Black youth organizations right now are doing any kind of analysis about the situation that Black youth in this country trust, So I think we also need to, the way I also understand it, we are in post 9/11 America, where Islamophobia and anti-Arab things have been part and parcel of this society. So we cannot expect that these ideologies will be removed overnight. But I do think the fact that we're seeing like there is almost no university where no kind of action has happened tells you that there is a momentum. But yeah, I'm walking you guys.
No, you're right. You're right. And I think I'm being overly like.
No, I think you're right to call out, like, why not, right? I think as Black people, we do need to put it out there. I agree with you 100%. But I've been trying to understand the why. Like, I'm like, why haven't we seen large encampments or things like that? And this is where my mind has led.
So talk to me about that. You said you've been trying to look at the why. So when you say that, what do you mean?
Like, why haven't we seen the large scale encampments on HBCUs is what I mean. And gotcha. I was trying to, it's also like in conversation with like my with my Black friends in Syracuse, we've had conversations, and this post 9/11 America thing, I realize, has really cast a shadow into people's perception about the region, right? And so like Islamophobia and anti-Arabness is something that the state has been kind of reproducing in different ways. Whether it's the movies we're consuming, whether it's the conversations we're having, whether it's the image of terrorists on our screens threatening our way of life. I think there are those elements that make it difficult for people to understand the current moment and to stand on the right side. So I just thought of like, why wasn't internationalism so complicated back in the 60s? And I think it was because we had radical groups who were doing radical analysis, like what the Black Panthers Party did when the 1967 war happened, and they put out a few different papers on to their constituency regarding what was happening. And I know there's a lot of organizations like GPAM included, the Black Agenda report, that are putting out things, Black organizations in the US. But I think also like we have to reckon with what's been happening in this country post 9/11 and how well those ideas have been cemented in our minds.
Thank you. And Jared's here. All right,
Yeah, my bad. I don't know what happened to my camera. It just went out. So I don't know. So I'm just here. But yeah,
two voices in the ether and Mahi.
There it is.
There you go.
I don't know what happened, but it just dipped out on me for a second. So sorry about that. But yeah. But I heard everything, was listening intently. So and I appreciate the commentary. And at some point, maybe we could do it here. Maybe the three of us can reconvene, and I can break out some of what my student project responses included. We can parse some of that out in terms of trying to understand where some of the HBCU students are intellectually. And if I can get my colleague down the road here, Bowie, to do the same, we can have even more robust conversation, because we sort of both partnered unofficially on this sort of survey of our students. So, but I think that would be an interesting, maybe even an interesting way to come up with a good reason to have you come back and talk more about all of this and update and all and the Sudan and everything else. So there's a lot more to get to, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely be interested, even just going through the survey response, because I am genuinely curious, like what is behind the motivations of people. So I'll be honored to do that.
All right, right on. Yeah, Renee, let's
set it up. And then I know you had like a 6:30 time frame that you had to be done by about, Mahi. So can you talk to us just a little bit about like what's next? All right, can you just tell like why you all decided to close the encampment, so people understand like what that decision was? And then I know we talked about like this is going to be a continuing process, and like you all are still in the work. So if you don't mind just giving a little bit about that before we let you go, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So part of why we decided to, I think it was on May 8th, Wednesday. That was a Wednesday. Yeah. On May 8th, they came and gave us, like, after multiple attempts to remove us in different ways, saying, oh, you guys should move, you guys should do this. May 8th, they came and gave us an unsigned letter telling us that we should be removed or we're going to be sanctioned through the student conduct book. And we kind of said no, and they asked us to show our IDs, and we still refused, and we stayed. I think that was so before that day, we met with admin once. They weren't willing to give us any other dates to meet with them earlier, and graduation would have been that weekend. We decided to move. Even our game plan was stay through graduation, because that would be our leverage for them to concede to anything or to even sit and discuss our demands profoundly. But they did not. Since the first meeting we had and the last we met with them twice, they basically just did not touch the demands, did not want to talk about them. By the end of it, they had given us a sheet that reflects why they didn't accept our demands, which is really like whataboutism. It doesn't say anything. And they selectively chose which demands they'd engage and just ignored the rest. Some are so clear, like you could just cancel these programs. We've bullet pointed the programs that we've identified, but they didn't even want to talk about those things. And so the point is, once graduation weekend had passed, there would be no point for us to be here, because we wanted to hold the space to either leverage some of our concessions or to use it as a liberated space. We also had created a liberation library. So the point is either we're functioning as a space where people are learning about Palestine and the genocide, or we're leveraging the space until we get what we want. And after graduation and after students left, both were really no reason. And it seemed like they were basically we could stay, we could have held our ground, because they said, oh, you need to come to a conclusion. They've been saying that since the first day. We've just refused to be moved. So the decision to move was more of a strategic reason to okay, we've this was kind of like an event to have everyone introduce themselves to each other, to build relations, to like make networks with the community. Like now we have like a better assessment of who's our allies, who's our opposition, how is admin going to respond. Like this was kind of our learning curve, right? Like we already have meetings planned out throughout the summer to reorganize, because we're coming back next semester. We're coming back stronger, more organized, more networked, and more officially like institutionalized, because that one, like the encampment was more spontaneous. It was a bunch of different organizations and individuals who came together for a shared cause. This is going to be people who have actually dwelled together are now creating different systems and ways we're going to use to pressure the university to concede with our demands, because our demands are still unmoved. We're calling ourselves the Gaza Solidarity Encampment for now, but we've already branched out into different working groups that are going to be building ammunition over the summer, so that next semester we go harder. Yeah, and we're also we're also like, you know, all of the encampment folks are also doing a lot of like teaching sessions, the debriefs about how their negotiations are going, how they're like I have so many like basically resolutions that have been put forth by the different encampments, and just like it's excellent. It's excellent. Some of the language, some of the like framing, some of the research that's going into it, it's excellent. So part of what we're doing is also going through all of these different forms and trying to figure out our own way and building relations across encampments.
Now that's dope. Very good. Thank you very much. I think Renee might be a little busy, so I will thank you very much. I know you got to run.
Yeah, I was like trying to hold off walking out the door because I don't want to get kicked off the internet.
No, it's all good. So I tell you what, you both gotta go. I gotta go slightly after, so I'll let you both go, and I'll give the wrap up for the people and get us out of here. And because you all got more for the people you got to do. I just got soccer practice to get to. So thank you very much, Mahdi.
Yes, Mahi. Thank you so much
for putting this together. Right on, Mahi. I think Mahi. I think of somebody else. Mahdi.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I also go by Mahdi, like in some places of
See,
the
I
world.
knew
So
it.
you're good.
I knew it. I knew it. Right on. Thanks to you both.
Thanks.
Right on. Take good care.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody. All right, good people. Big shout out to Mahi and Renee. Another great show right here on Saturdays. We got a little more time for you to stretch and get yourself ready for warrior class. So please, we're continuing in our 90 days through the wilderness of demonetization. So if you can, move your support over to our Patreon. The link is in the show description. Immaterially continue to like, share, subscribe to the channel. We right here, keeping it going. BPM. Peace, if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll see you next week right here at the same time, same place with more Saturday with Renee.